Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis advocated reviving the Cold War's largest military exercise, Reforger, to bolster Europe's defences and deter Russia. According to Stavridis, the return of the practice of large-scale exercises will help NATO demonstrate its readiness for possible conflicts and increase the combat readiness of its allies. He recalled that Reforger, which means return of troops to Germany, was first launched in 1969 and was held annually until 1993, after which it was suspended with the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. The exercises involved tens of thousands of troops, mostly Americans, some 400,000 of whom were stationed in Europe at the time. Their goal was to quickly move forces to Western Germany in the event of war with the Soviet Union. Stavridis says that now, given the rising tensions, it is time to reactivate such activities. In a Bloomberg column, he identifies 3 key factors that justify the return of Reforger. The first is the conflicts in Georgia in 2008. Ukraine and the growing concerns of the Baltic and Finnish sides regarding the Russian military presence. The second is the increase in military spending in Russia, where over 7% of GDP is allocated to defense, as well as the active actions of Russian President Vladimir Putin, which, according to the expert, are unlikely to cease in the near future. The third is Europe's awareness of the threat from Moscow and the readiness of US allies to strengthen their defense, including holding large annual exercises. Stavridis emphasizes that such exercises could not be just training, but full-fledged rehearsals of real combat scenarios with the possibility of command at all levels and operational control of troops. He also suggests distributing responsibilities for participating countries in the exercises: Turkey, ground forces; Great Britain, the naval component; Germany, air and missile defense; Belgium, special forces; Italy, protection of the southern flank; the Netherlands, the northern. As for the US role, he believes its tasks should include intelligence, cybersecurity, satellite communications, artificial intelligence, and unmanned systems. Russian President Vladimir Putin is trying to decide whether it is a nation-state or an aspiring empire. And until that fundamental question is resolved, conflicts like the one over Ukraine will continue in various forms. To ground imperial ambitions in old national myths is as dangerous in Russia's case as it is everywhere else. According to the Kiev Post, the Kremlin's full-scale war on Ukraine has become a monument to Vladimir Putin's strategic myopia and imperial obsession. Russian losses have surpassed a staggering 1 million casualties killed, wounded or captured. It is noted that Putin's generals, steeped in corruption and incompetence, have squandered men and material in human wave assaults and poorly coordinated offensives. The so-called meat grinder strategy, throwing waves of minimally trained conscripts and prison recruits into Ukrainian fire, has yielded little beyond body counts. Kiev Post says that Russia loses around 1,500 soldiers daily. The economic toll is already dire. The Putin exodus of skilled Russian professionals, up to 200,000 by mid-2022, has gutted Russia's intellectual and human capital. Meanwhile, the war cost, estimated at more than $400 billion a year, drains his shrinking treasury. Russia's economy has been placed on a wartime footing, but it's a house of cards, unsustainable without victory. Following the Sino-Soviet split, the Soviet Union had vast military forces stationed along its border with China, and violent conflict erupted for 7 months in 1969. But the two countries de-escalated, and now both are better off for it. To be sure, the road to establishing the same kind of relationship between Russia and Ukraine is much longer. Putin's behavior has understandably left Ukrainians skeptical of Russia, if not hostile towards it. Unless Russia refocuses on building its future solely within its own borders, the region will remain under a cloud of insecurity, ultimately to Russia's detriment. Kiev Post says that as Russian losses mount, the question is not if Putin will fail, but how soon. His military, hollowed out by corruption and attrition, cannot sustain this war. Ukraine, bolstered by Western aid and fierce resolve, grows stronger, while Russia spills oceans of blood and mountains of treasure. The fact that Russia deployed its very limited fleet of MiG-35 fighters for air defense over Moscow could be a sign of desperation, potentially pointing to a shortage of specialized air defense systems like the S-400 and Pantsir due to losses in Ukraine, writes Ruben Johnson, a former Pentagon consultant and foreign military affairs expert at the Kazimierz Pulaski Foundation in Warsaw, in his article for 1945. The MiG-35, which has previously struggled to secure export orders and has been produced in minimal quantities, may also be rapidly evaluated in this new defensive role, the publication says. The deployment is said to be the first known operational use of the MiG-35 in a defensive role near the Russian capital. The aircraft is not part of the regular Russian military inventory and was only built in small numbers. There has even been discussion in Moscow that it is a weapon system with no planned use. Moscow's military planners also never planned to use the aircraft in this war. So bringing it into service in this way raises numerous questions about whether Moscow has enough remaining air defense capabilities, Johnson said. The plane would never have been put into service if Russian forces had not been desperately looking for a way to counter the growing number of Ukrainian attack drones, a retired Russian aircraft designer said. According to the author, the MiG-35 was generally promoted as an export program. Some speculate that the inclusion of these fighters in the air defense role is also part of the aircraft's operational evaluation, as the MiG-35 remains a largely untested commodity. Overall, it appears that the use of MiG-35 fighters is the only option that Russia has left to strengthen defenses around the capital, the author stated. So another gap has appeared in Moscow's defense, and Ukraine has gained new opportunities for a strike. Let us recall, as defense observer Isaac Zeitz previously noted, the MiG-35 is a multi-role fighter developed by the Russian company Mikoyan, which is part of the United Aircraft Corporation in the Russian Federation. Despite its superiority over older models, such as the MiG-29, the fighter has failed to find its place in the international market, leaving experts doubtful about the future of the aircraft.